Now to that deadly mystery unfolding tonight along the U.S. border with Mexico. The search for two mass graves believed to hold the remains of more than 100 people, including American citizens. FBI forensic experts are converging tonight on two ranches in the Mexican desert near the border town of Juarez, where they expect to uncover gruesome evidence of an out-of-control drug war. We have two reports tonight. We'll begin with NBC's Fred Francis, who's in Juarez.
65 FBI agents. Their grisly task, exhume what may be as many as 100 murder victims, at least 22 of them possibly Americans, killed by Mexico's notorious Juarez drug cartel. The FBI says the bodies are at two ranches, a 30-minute drive south of the U.S. border.
During the past 4 years and possibly longer, citizens of both countries have disappeared without a trace.
The start of the joint Mexican FBI operation began 2 nights ago when elite troops of the Mexican military surrounded the ranches. The entire operation had been kept secret from local and state police. That's because agents say the local Mexican police were hired as assassins to carry out contract killings for the cartel. Among those missing and suspected dead, Roman Aguilar's brother.
All we want is something. We want to know something.
Among FBI agents here, experts in forensics and body identification. Some of the same agents who were sent to the killing fields in Kosovo. They are equipped with ground-penetrating radar to help them detect human remains. Also on scene, an FBI informant who admits to killing and burying some of the victims. The informant, a former Mexican policeman, allegedly admitted that 10 months ago. It took that long to collect corroborating evidence. The informant told the FBI that many of the victims were killed because they had knowledge of, participation in, or were witnesses to drug-related transactions. Agents say the Juarez cartel, once the largest of 7 in Mexico, is now suspected of killing at least 400 people since the mid-90s. Jaime Hervila, who has tried to keep track of the victims, knows of 200 missing, including his godson.
We are facing one heck of a monster here.
And while the wholesale killing has apparently stopped, agents say the drug business is still booming along the southwest border. Fred Francis, NBC News, Juarez, Mexico.
This is Pete Williams in Washington, where officials say despite heroic efforts by honest Mexican police, the real power in northern Mexico is not held by the government. It's in the hands of drug lords, violent, ruthless, dominating nearly everything. So now, with word that a Mexican policeman may actually have been involved in killing some of those in the mass graves, former U.S. drug agents are not surprised.
Anytime there's a drug murder in Mexico, you don't know if the bad guys did it or local law enforcement hired by the bad guys committed the crimes.
Since the mid-1990s, when a handful of powerful drug dealers took over trafficking in Mexico, U.S. officials say they've bought off nearly every part of the government. One stunning example, the arrest 2 years ago of General Gutierrez Rebollo, Mexico's top drug enforcement agent, accused of taking bribes from major traffickers. American officials say once that enforcement power was transferred to the Mexican military, units were riddled with corruption. Police, journalists, even drug couriers who don't cooperate are soon killed, often in violent deaths. For nearly 6 years, Tom Constantine watched the spreading lawlessness as chief of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. Retiring earlier this year, he says Mexican drug lords operate in a virtual sanctuary.
If you were an honest, decent citizen in Mexico who wanted to provide information to the government about drug traffickers or kidnappers or corrupt police officers, who would you go to?
And in Mexico, there's little optimism the problem will soon get any better, with drug cartels shipping in nearly 2/3 of all the cocaine available in the United States.
Corruption is still there. Drugs are going to the United States, crossing through Mexico, and finally nothing happens.
U.S. drug experts say if Mexican authorities really are serious about fighting the drug lords, they'll arrest some of them. But there's not much hope here of that happening anytime soon. Pete Williams, NBC News, Washington.
Good evening. A CBS News exclusive tonight, the discovery of secret killing fields used by Mexico's narco thugs to bury dozens of their murder victims inside Mexico, just across the U.S. border. Some of the dead are U.S. citizens. Some just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. CBS's Jim Stewart has been working this story hard to come up with the facts. Jim, what are they?
Dan, an FBI task force has moved into El Paso, Texas tonight to begin recovering an estimated 100 bodies at 2 grave sites just inside the Mexican border. The murder victims, including perhaps as many as half a dozen Americans, are part of what is known in the region as the disappeared, people who've simply vanished in recent years at the hands of Mexican security police or the drug cartels who control the region. And FBI officials believe many more people are still unaccounted for. Working with the Mexican Army and federal police, the FBI is expected to converge on 2 remote ranches south of Juarez, one 10 miles from the border, the other 30 miles further south, where the bodies are believed to be buried in ravines and slit trenches, some as deep as 12 feet. Sources tell CBS News a 500-man-sized battalion of Mexican soldiers has set up a security perimeter around the 2 ranches, and that 200 FBI agents and forensic specialists have begun surveying the burial sites. Exhumation is expected to begin early tomorrow. Under agreement with Mexico, the bodies will be removed to El Paso for DNA analysis and notification of families. Most of the missing came from Juarez, the Mexican border city that is the staging area for a multi-billion-dollar drug pipeline into the United States. Many were last seen in the custody of Mexican police who may have been acting on orders from drug gangs looking to intimidate rivals. The recovery operation, larger even than the one the FBI attempted recently in Kosovo, is expected to take 30 days. Human rights groups have been insisting for months now that nowhere in the world have so many people disappeared in the context of drug-related violence than along the U.S.-Mexican border at El Paso. Tonight it appears at least some of them may have been found. Dan?
Jim Stewart in Washington. Also in the battle with Mexican drug traffickers, the U.S. reports marijuana seizures along the U.S. southwestern border are up 33% over the last year. In the first 6 months of 1999 alone, more than 1,300,000 pounds of marijuana was seized. Cocaine seized from January to June totals more than 145,000 pounds, including record hauls seized by the U.S. Coast Guard along Mexico's Pacific coast and the Caribbean. Good evening. There are fresh reminders tonight of how dangerous the operations of narcotics gangs have become all along the U.S. southern border. The first human remains were recovered today from suspected mass graves used by murderous Mexican narco thugs. Mexican authorities say 2 sites just south of the Texas border may have been used to bury more than 100 victims, including some U.S. citizens. U.S. agents, including forensic experts, are at the scene. CBS's Jim Stewart, who broke the story here last night, has new details for you.
The first piece of evidence found by FBI investigators was a human scalp. Later, they discovered a cave and suggestions that people had been tortured inside. Now they are surveying the surrounding ranch land, and more officials say they're convinced they're standing atop a giant killing field. Only they still aren't sure how many bodies they'll find.
There are about 100 people who have disappeared, and we're in the process of investigating that.
At least 8 arrests have been made thus far. More are expected. President Clinton blamed the murders directly on Mexican narcotics gangs.
It's a horrible example, apparently, of the excesses of the drug-dealing cartels in Mexico.
FBI officials point specifically to the gang of the late Amado Carrillo Fuentes, who died in 1997 following some botched plastic surgery, and whose death sparked a wave of shootouts as his brother fought for control. Now the Fuentes cartel is in undisputed command of drug shipments through Juarez and neighboring El Paso, and has frequently used murder to stay in power. This is a delicate case for the FBI. The burial sites are on Mexican soil. Most of the victims are Mexican. But the danger of the Fuentes cartel has become so great that U.S. officials feel they must press Mexico to accept American help. The problem is many of these disappeared victims were last seen in the company of Mexican police. Dan?
Jim Stewart. Beyond the cross-border politics, forensics, and detective work, there is the human horror being felt on both sides of the border by relatives of the missing and the people who live in turf pretty much ruled by murderous drug traffickers. CBS's Maureen Maher is tracking this part of the story.
From the air, it looks like nothing more than a fenced-off plot of desert. But the discovery of 2 mass graves just south of the dusty border town of Juarez, Mexico, while a surprise, is not a shock to locals. This man says lately they have seen many more deaths, even assassinations in broad daylight related to drug trafficking. In the early 1990s, the Mexican government tried cracking down on the multi-billion-dollar drug cartels. But soon after, people in Juarez began vanishing, and many suspected at the hands of Mexican security police. More than 200 are missing. Human rights activist Jaime Urbea says cries for help from relatives have gone unanswered on both sides of the border.
The American consul doesn't want to know about these problems, don't care. They give you the lip service that they are supposed to do.
Perhaps one reason the U.S. government has been reluctant to get involved is that many of those who vanished were known drug traffickers, but others were simply innocent victims in a progressively violent war on drugs.
I just want to know.
One way or the other.
Maybe if it's them, I could have a place where I could go and set flowers. And if it's not them, I'll keep on looking.
Claudia Sanchez has been looking for her parents for 5 years. They disappeared after her father, a former petty officer in the U.S. Navy, invented and sold a highly sensitive listening device to the Mexican government. For the Sanchez family and others, unearthing the bodies of the missing will likely mean digging elsewhere for more answers.
If they find them, will you find some sense of peace, or will you still look for the justice?
I'll look for justice. Somebody had to do this. And I need justice.
But justice works on its own timetable, and finding out who may take even longer than discovering where. Maureen Maher, CBS News, Juarez, Mexico.
On closer to home, authorities in Mexico are hunting for members of a drug gang who may have escaped a shootout with the army. It happened 80 miles south of El Paso, Texas, in a town where drug cartels now rule. Bill Whitaker has the latest on the Mexican drug war.
This bloodbath started as a drug gang kidnapping, ended in a shootout with Mexican troops. 21 killed in a snowy desert town, including one soldier. Since January 1st, some 230 drug slayings around Juarez, Mexico's murder capital. Compare that to 75 this time last year, and you get a sense of the exploding violence. Vicious cartels battling to control the $14 billion a year illicit trade feeding an insatiable U.S. appetite for drugs. Mexican authorities are hitting the cartels with all they have. Soldiers stormed this Juarez warehouse last week, seizing 2 tons of marijuana. Yesterday, 10 gangsters arrested in Mexico City with their cache of guns and grenades. But the gangs have the money and the weapons to fight back.
While drugs are being smuggled north, a lot of guns are going south.
Guns seized at the port of Long Beach in December being smuggled into Mexico. By U.S. estimates, 95% of cartel guns are smuggled from the states, 2,000 a day, according to a recent investigation. Janet Napolitano, the new head of Homeland Security, has ordered a crackdown on gun smuggling. On the streets of Juarez, it feels like war.
It's such a huge fight. It's going to continue until one of the cartels takes control of the country.
They had taken control of Villa the desert town where 21 died yesterday. Troops came in last year after traffickers killed 3 police chiefs and forced the mayor to flee. Tijuana journalist Vicente Calderon says the government was slow to react to the cartel's growing threat.
The government used to tell us that, this was just a problem among drug cartels. During the last 2 years, it's coming out to the surface and affecting everybody else.
With more than 6,000 slayings, 2008 was Mexico's most deadly year for drug violence. This year is starting to look even worse. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Secretary of State Clinton visits Mexico, where the big topic will be drug violence that has killed more than 1,000 people already this year. The U.S. is taking new action to guard the border and support Mexico's government. Seth Doan reports.
The brazen kidnappings and violence across Mexico has business booming at armored car factories like this one in Mexico City. Just one way citizens here are trying to protect themselves. The U.S. now says it will try to help protect citizens, too, on both sides of the border.
Our goal is twofold. One is to provide assistance to the government of Mexico to break up these huge cartels, which are funneling tonnage quantities of illegal drugs into our country on a regular basis, and are conducting this war of violence within Mexico that has resulted in over 6,000 homicides. What we want to do is to better secure the border area against further violence and make it a safe and secure area where, of course, the rule of law is upheld and enforced.
It's a high-profile push, sending about 500 more law enforcement agents to the border, including 350 from the Department of Homeland Security, about 100 from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, 16 more Drug Enforcement Agency posts. All of it an effort to bolster President Felipe Calderón's crackdown on the drug cartels, who are battling over an estimated $18 to $39 billion in narcotic sales a year. Mexican officials say they're trying to make the transition from defense to offense.
Nosotros estamos capturando.
The Mexico City prosecutor says they are capturing criminals and running investigations. Cartel turf wars have claimed more than 7,000 lives in the last 15 months, a reign of terror that bleeds over into southwest U.S. border cities like Phoenix, Arizona, where there were nearly 400 drug-related kidnappings last year. While the cartels are Mexican, narco-terror is a two-way street. Drugs come in from Mexico, but 90% of the more than 35,000 weapons confiscated in Mexican drug killings came from the U.S. And in Los Angeles, officials busted 48 people involved in a Mexican heroin and cocaine trafficking ring, earning an estimated $2 million a month. Napolitano, Attorney General Holder, and Secretary of State Clinton will all be heading to Mexico City in coming days to hammer home the message that both countries will stop the guns, stop the drugs, and stop the bleeding. Seth Doan, CBS News, Mexico City.